That help, Jake? Welcome, everybody. Good evening to our third and final session of the Gaming Advisory Commission. For those at home that aren't familiar with us, we are a commission that's put together by ordinance to distribute dollars to not-for-profit organizations. And the amount is determined by a percentage of the city budget. We have 5 members chosen by the city council. We have 5 members chosen by Mayor McDermott, and then I, as chief of staff, am the president of the commission. With that, why don't we do roll call? Alexander? Zolno?
Present.
Edwards?
Present.
Farrell?
Present.
Flores? Mabry? Rakos?
Here.
Zaney?
Here.
Venez?
Here.
Wielgus?
Here.
And Talon here. If I did the math correctly, we have 8 present and 3 absent. Yep, okay. All right. With that, as I said, this is our third session, so we've gone through majority of the organizations. I think we're down to 16 that we haven't talked about at all. But prior to that, we had a few that we delayed so that we can find out some additional information. So why don't we do those couple first, and then we'll start with the final 16. So one was the Center of Workforce Innovations, Adult Education. I think the question that came up at the time was, do they receive revenue directly from the state? And we found out the answer is yes. However, they don't receive enough to fully finance their operations. So I don't have exact numbers, but I did find out they are certainly needing of dollars. And we talked about this, obviously, in the study session. So with that, do we have any suggestions from the commission?
I would suggest $5,000.
You have a suggestion of 5,000?
I would agree.
An agreement? Anybody, any other discussion? Okay, we will mark them down for 5,000. The other group that we had a question on was the Hope Center of Northwest Indiana. At the time we were reviewing the application, I had mentioned that I also serve on the Legacy Foundation. I'm the Grants Committee Chair, and I knew that we had given them a grant through that organization, so I wanted to find out how much the grant was for and make sure that it wasn't a fully funded project. As it turned out, the Legacy Foundation was only able to do a minimal amount of their request, so they still have needs for the community internet station that they want to have open to the public to get the equipment that's needed for that operation. So with that, do we have any suggestions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would suggest that we give 5,000.
We have a suggestion of 5,000. Anybody else?
I would agree.
Agreement? Any other discussion?
Yes, I would agree also. I have been in contact with Pastor Levon Carson, and they've been working on this project for the last couple of years. And they do a lot for the community, so I'm all in favor of that.
That's great. Thank you, Councilman Rakos. Any other discussion? Okay, let's mark down 5,000. And even though it's not the full amount they're requesting, as most of the organizations are not getting the full amount, I think with the other supplement from Legacy Foundation, and who knows, maybe some other grants, they'll be able to finalize that internet station. Okay, so those were the 2 that we had questions on.
Mr. President, I think we also had a question on Hammond Boxing Club.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Mr. Wielgus. I believe you were going to meet with them, and can you update the commission?
I did. I had a good meeting with Mr. Hardesty yesterday, and pretty much I passed out a of various costs that they have to run their organization. So everybody has it in front of them. We discussed it in the meeting prior to the open public session. And so my suggestion to the board would be that the expenses that they have outlined in the pass-out sheet are true and presented as as the amounts of about $41,050.
So, and for those that weren't listening in on one of the earlier sessions, we typically don't fund salaries for organizations, so we like to have the funds go directly to equipment and supplies and operational costs. So this is great that we could see exactly where the money's going, knowing they have expenses of $41,000. Do we have a suggestion for the Hammond Boxing Club?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would recommend we give $30,000.
We have a recommendation of $30,000.
I second that.
And we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, let's mark them down for $30,000. Thank you, Mr. Wilgus, for doing a little extra legwork for that one. Okay, there was one other that I wanted to bring up, and that was Humane Indiana. I think when we had a discussion at one of our earlier sessions, we had mentioned that with what Humane Indiana does, we actually have a partnership with the Humane Society, and so for that reason at the time, I don't think we said we were going to give any certain amount, but as we recently found out, Humane Indiana is the actual Humane Society. They just have different locations outside of their main location on 45th Street in Munster. So this is a group that we do typically partnership with. They do work with our animal shelter. So with that, do we have a suggestion for Humane Indiana?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to suggest $5,000.
A suggestion of $5,000. Anybody else?
I would agree, Mr.
Agree.
President.
Okay, any other discussion? Very good. We'll mark them down for $5,000. Thank you. Okay, getting into new applications that we have not discussed. The first one, I believe, is St. Casimir School. St. Casimir made a request for $15,003. Is that accurate? It says 3 on my thing. Okay, all right. Maybe it's 15,000 and that's a, let's take a look. Yep, no, $15,003. That is accurate. Okay, and also, last year, we did not give a grant to St. Casimir. So this year, the purpose of their funding is, it says below is a cost estimate to complete the implementation of the technology upgrade throughout the rest of the St. Casimir building. And they talk about some equipment and software where they need money. So with that, do we have a recommendation for St. Casimir School?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
President? Go ahead.
I'd recommend $10,000 as we've done with the other schools.
We have a recommendation for $10,000. Any other discussion?
I second that.
Second? Anybody else? Very good. Let's mark them down for $10,000. Thank you. Next, we have St. Joseph Catholic Church. They made a grant request for $5,000 last year, and I guess I'll remind people they're just tuning in for the first time. Because of COVID, we were limited on funding last year, and I believe we weren't able to give them any type of grant last year. So St. Joseph's, obviously many people are aware that they have a soup kitchen in downtown Hammond, and it says that they want to purchase some new refrigerators and freezers as part of that operation. So with that, do we have a suggestion from the commission?
Mr. President, I would suggest that we do the $5,000.
Second that.
We have a suggestion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's mark them down for $5,000. Thank you. Next, we have School City of Hammond Robotics Program. They made a grant request of $30,000. Last year, we were able to give them $10,000, which I think is the max we gave anybody last year. I think many of us are very familiar with the robotics program and the accolades that they have achieved over the years. You hear about them every year, how they're taking first place in these competitions. It's pretty exciting. This year, the purpose of the funding is for similar registration fees, transportation lodging for the events, material supplies, shipping costs for the robots, and other expenses. So with that, do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Venez?
yes, I recommend that we award the full $30,000.
Recommendation for $30,000. Anybody else?
Agree.
I agree. Mr.
Agree.
President, I'd like to go on record as saying I recuse myself. My husband sits on the school board.
Very good. So I heard a lot of agreements. Any further discussion? Okay, we will mark them down for 30,000. Next, we have a group called Seedlings Theater Company. They are located in Valparaiso, which I know in some of our previous applications, we get a little bit cautious with having too much funding go to other communities only because these are Hammond dollars, so we try and focus on things that really are located and help Hammond. However, the purpose of their funding, they say, is for rental of space, rights and royalties, scripts, sets, props, costumes, and lost revenue. I assume that means from COVID. Do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Venez.
I recommend that we pass on this application, although the work that they do is fine. We do have a local community theater and here in Hammond, so I recommend that we pass on this.
We have a suggestion to pass. Anybody else?
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody agrees. In fact, not only do we have the local, because obviously I know Toll Theater is on our list, but we also gave money to another organization earlier, Hammond Community Theater. So,
On Conkey.
oh yeah, and Beaton, it's on Conkey. So actually three, and all three are obviously located in Hammond. So, okay, we will pass on Seedlings Theater Company for now. Next, we have the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, OLPH. They actually made a grant request of $1,000, one of our lower requests. I think we're familiar with this organization. It says, purpose of funding, they'll utilize the grant to continue to serve the needs of Hammond residents in financial crisis, which could be rent and mortgage assistance, NIPSCO and water assistance, food and medication assistance. So they're making a request for $1,000. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I'd like to suggest that we fund them fully for their $1,000.
We have a recommendation for the full $1,000. Any others?
I agree. I
I
agree.
agree.
All in agreement. Let's mark down 1,000. Thank you. All right, next we have South Shore Arts. They are located in downtown Hammond at the substation number 9. I believe that's right off of Fayette Street. And let me go to the purpose of their funding. Purpose, use of the funding, they're requesting $20,000 to support the educational programs and community outreach initiatives described. These activities, based out of substation number 9, began in summer 2021 and continue today. We believe that the programming we envision for the building is the embodiment of our mission. The commitment of our organization to serve Hammond residents has been matched by a considerable investment of resources on the part of donors, community partners, and patrons. And they thank us for our support in the past as well. I know they also, as part of their application, wanted to show their support for the Jeff Speck plan that we put together. And actually, just last week, the Holman Avenue redevelopment aspect of the project began. So it's an exciting time for downtown Hammond. So with that, South Shore Arts, they're asking for $20,000. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I suggest we give them $5,000.
We have a suggestion for $5,000. Is there any other?
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. Any further discussion? Okay. We'll put 5,000. It'll be nice to see some activity at the substation again, especially with all the things we have going on in downtown Hammond. Next, we have the Gatehouse Hammond. They have their headquarters in Griffith, but they do have several locations in Hammond. It says, what is the purpose of their funding? They need to purchase 2 dependable vehicles. You can get the girls back and forth to meetings, work, court, doctor's appointments, church. They need new mattresses, pillows, sheets, towels, etc. For those that don't know what they do, their mission is to help women coming out of rehab. jail or prison, and they're transitioning back into the world to learn to live without drugs and alcohol. So I think that's why they have several locations, because I'm sure there's several people, they don't live in one group home. So with that, their request is for $15,000. And by the way, I believe this is the one that their organization obtained their 501c3 status in February of this year. So it's a newer operation. With that, do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend $5,000, mostly due to the fact that they're basically a newer organization rather than half or nearly a full amount. $5,000 should be enough to get them started.
We have a recommendation for $5,000. Any other suggestions?
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. I know the Gatehouse has contacted the mayor's office. They do want to talk to us about their operation. I think we played a little bit of phone tag, but I look forward to sitting down with them and learning more, and I'm sure they'll be appreciative of the $5,000 that we're marking down for them today. So thank you. Next is the Welcome Network. It's a Chicago Immigrant Welcome Network. Their headquarters, it's listed, or their P.O. box is in Munster. However, their address is on Hoffman Street in Hammond. They are making a request of $4,000, and it talks about the processing of incoming refugees from Afghanistan. When the country left Afghanistan, there were a number of folks that were helping the United States while we were there, and I believe they were the ones that the country welcomed them to the U.S. And I also believe this organization is working with all the Ukrainian folks that unfortunately are going through a very tough time in their country, and a lot of people are looking to move somewhere else and relocate because of what's going on there. So with that, they have a grant request for $4,000. Do we have a suggestion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I
Ms. Singh.
suggest we give them the $4,000 that they're asking for.
Suggestion for the full amount of $4,000. Anybody else?
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. We will mark them down for the full amount of $4,000. And our prayers go out to all the people in Ukraine right now. Next is the Toll Performing Arts. Everybody, I'm sure, here is familiar. They're on Homan Avenue in downtown. The purpose of their funding is for operations and production costs. I believe they have not had too many performances due to COVID, but I also think they are now back on track, and I think they actually did have a performance not that long ago. The Toll is making a request of $50,000. Do we have a suggestion from the commission?
Mr. President, I would suggest that we give them $20,000.
We have a suggestion for 20, did you say 20 or 25,000?
25.
25,000. Okay, we have a suggestion for 25,000. Anybody else?
I agree.
You have agreement?
I agree.
Any other discussion? Very good. We'll mark them down for 25,000. One thing I mentioned in earlier meetings is that unfortunately we are limited on funds. This year we have $550,000 to give in grants. However, the grant requests were closer to $1.2 million. So that's why if you hear us not giving the full amount every time, it's not that we don't want to, it's that we want to make sure every organization that we choose to help gets some sort of some help based on their request. So just want to make that clear for everybody. Next, we have the Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. They have a request for $2,000. They're located in Homan Avenue in Hammond. The purpose of their funding says they'll be doing an annual trunk or treat. They do youth gym days, Easter egg hunt, and this will be based on, obviously, if there's any issues with COVID. And it seems like they are open to the public. They don't just limit it to only people that go to their church. So obviously we appreciate that. The request is $2,000. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I would suggest we give them the $2,000 they requested.
Suggestion for 2,000. Anybody else?
I agree.
I agree.
All right, everybody's in agreement. We'll mark them down for 2,000. Next, we have True Destiny, Inc. They are located in Gary, Indiana. They made a request for $50,000. The purpose of their funding, it says they will host 2 8-week programs and 1 summer camp. Each week, and I should mention, it says they work with the Hammond Cosmetology Department. So that's the type of industry we're talking about. Each 8-week course will train 6 clients. Each student will receive a full working kit with tools needed to learn and work on clients. And they have staff 4 instructors to teach the 8-week sessions. It's talking about for materials and costs. Do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Venez?
I request that we deny this application based on the fact that they are not a not-for-profit and they operate out of Gary.
Okay, we have a suggestion, because they're not-for-profit and they're not located in Hammond. Do we have any other suggestions?
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. Okay, we will pass on this application. Next, and I believe we do have it listed in our guidelines that you have to be a not-for-profit organization. I'll double check on that, but very much appreciated that you found that, Councilwoman Venez. Next, we have the Whiting Hammond Knights of Columbus. They're located on 119th Street. They are making a request for $15,000. This funding is for their pierogi drop delivery project, and it says this event occurs entirely in Hammond, Indiana. And they are a charitable organization. It says over the past 5 years, Knights of Columbus has donated in excess of $60,000 back into the community. So with that, do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. President, I'd recommend that we do $5,000.
We have a recommendation for $5,000. Any other suggestions?
I
I
agree.
agree.
Everybody is in agreement. We will mark them down for $5,000. Thank you. Whiting Robertsdale Chamber of Commerce. I think everybody here is very familiar with them. They're located on 119th Street in Whiting, but they represent quite a few Hammond businesses as well. They are making a request of $25,000. And the primary use of the funding, it says funds will be used to help defray the costs of producing and delivering the Right Stuff newspaper to Hammond residents. Whiting assists for those costs for Whiting residents, as well support events such as Pierogi Fest and other community events and activities. In addition, the Chamber hosts a regular monthly program on WJOB radio that profiles local businesses. Finally, the Chamber holds forums and gatherings, including one at Lost Marsh and its annual dinner meeting at Dynasty Banquet Center. Do we have a recommendation from the Commission?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend we give them $10,000 as we have the other neighborhood organizations.
We have a recommendation of $10,000 to match what we've done for the other organizations. Do we have any other suggestions?
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement. We will mark them down for $10,000. Last, but certainly not least, we have Leon's Triathlon. I love how his name is World's Fastest Triathlon LLC. I don't know if he can prove that, but obviously we're all familiar with Leon's. It's a great event that usually is at Wolf Lake or around that area. It brings many people to Hammond, Indiana. It becomes a big tourist attraction. He is requesting $15,000, and he's going to use that for police, EMTs, and the fire department, which are paid at the site to help run the event and make sure everything runs smoothly. Do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Ms.
would recommend that we give the 15,000 as requested.
We have a recommendation for $15,000. Any other suggestions?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody's in agreement? Any other discussion? Okay, we will mark them down for $15,000. Okay, So that concludes all the applications and all the grants. So what we will do now, is there any discussion before I move forward? Okay, what we will do now is I'm going to read off each organization and the amount that this commission has approved. And I will read it in a way that it's recommending a motion, and then if all is good and everybody's comfortable, we can have somebody just say so moved and second, and then we'll actually have to do a roll call vote for the final. So if nobody has any discussion, I will begin. All right, we are looking for a motion to approve the following organizations and grant amounts. The American Legion Hammond Post 168 for $10,000. The American Veterans Collection, Inc. for $9,000. The Association for the Wolf Lake Initiative for $600. Bishop Knoll Institute for $10,000. Books, Brushes, and Bands for $20,000. Boys and Girls Club of Northwest Indiana for $9,932. The Center of Workforce Innovations Adult Education for $5,000. The Challenger Learning Center of Northwest Indiana for $15,000. Four Quarters for Life for $4,700. The Genesius Guild for $5,000. Girls on the Run of Northwest Indiana for $7,500. Greater Hammond Community Service, Inc. for $20,000. Habitat for Humanity Northwest Indiana for $5,000. Hammond Academy of Science and Technology Athletics for $10,000. Hammond Boxing Club for $30,000. Hammond Community Theater for $4,200. Hammond Community Watch for $20,000. Hammond Education Foundation for $10,000. Hammond Firefighter Local 566 for $30,000. Hammond Hermits Athletic Association for $10,000. Hammond Hispanic Community Committee for $2,500. Hammond Hurricanes for $10,000. Hammond Mohawks Athletic and Conservation Club for $8,000. Hammond Optimist Youth Sports for $10,000. Hammond Reeds for $10,000. Haven House for $17,850. HC3 for $15,000. Hessville Little League for $10,000. Homestead Enterprise Housing, Inc. for $5,000. Hope Center of Northwest Indiana for $5,000. Humane Indiana for $5,000. Impact, Inc. for $15,000. Lakeshore Cal Ripken / Babe Ruth for $10,000. Mental Health America of Northwest Indiana for $15,000. Montessori Children's Schoolhouse for $10,000. Mount Zion Drive, A.R. Burns Pleasant View Plaza for $7,300. New Hope Baptist Church College Day for $2,000. Ophelia Steen Family and Health Services Center for $15,000. Prom Genie for $10,000. Pulaski Park Neighborhood Association, Inc. for $15,000. St. Casimir School for $10,000. St. Joseph Catholic Church for $5,000. School City of Hammond Robotics for $30,000. Society of St. Vincent de Paul -OLPH for $1,000. South Shore Arts, Inc. for $5,000. The Gatehouse Hammond, Inc. for $5,000. The Welcome Network, Chicago Immigrant Welcome Network for $4,000. Toll Performing Arts Company for $25,000. Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church for $2,000. Whiting Hammond Knights of Columbus 1696 Columbian Club for $5,000. Whiting Robertsdale Chamber of Commerce for $10,000. World's Fastest Triathlon LLC Leon's Triathlon for $15,000 for a grand total of $550,582. Do we have somebody that would like to make that motion?
Mr. President, I would like to make the motion to accept the Gaming Commission, after long and hard work and a lot of time spent, accept as presented.
So we have a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman
I
Rakos?
have a minor, the Hammond firefighters is actually local 556. I don't know that it matters, but they are not 566, they're 556.
I would think it does matter.
Okay, let's say Hammond
So I'd
firefighters.
like to
So
make that amendment then?
it's an amendment to the motion so that, or do we have to do a motion for the amendment? Let's follow Robert's rules,
So moved.
Okay, so that, we have a moved and second.
I think I already
I'll
said
second.
We already have a moved and second. Do you typically do a roll call on an amendment? So let's do a roll call vote to change the Hammond firefighters to 556 instead of 566.
Mr. Chairman, I maybe heard you wrong, but I thought for quarters for life that you read 5,000. I have 4,700.
4 quarters for life. I believe I said 4,700, but did I?
I said 5,000, okay.
If I did, it was an error, so it is 4,700 on the actual list. So that was still part of the first motion.
Okay.
But I'm glad you brought that up just to clarify if that was a mistake. All right, we'll do a roll call on the amendment change. Alexander? Zolno?
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
Farrell?
Yes.
Flores? Mabry? Rakos?
yes.
Zaney?
Yes.
Vines?
Yes,
Wheelgus?
Yes.
Talon, yes. We have 8 yes, 3 absent, so that motion passes. So now, we still have the motion on the floor for the amended motion that changed the name. We have a motion by Councilman Rakos and a second by Councilwoman Vines. Any further discussion? Okay. Say it 3 times. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, here we go. Roll call vote. Alexander. Zolno.
Yes.
Edwards.
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Flores. Mabry. Rakos.
Yes.
Zaney.
Yes.
Vines.
yes.
Wheelgus.
Yes.
Talon, yes. Motion passes, 8 yes, 3 absent. With that, that concludes the Gaming Advisory Commission for 2022. I want to personally thank everybody that was involved and all the hard work and time we spent going through the many applications we received and the extra legwork that a lot of people did when we did have questions that needed answers before we were able to make a recommendation. I could honestly say this is, I think, the 3rd year that I've been involved with this, and it was a great team to work together with on all facets. And I want to include the people that unfortunately were not able to make it this evening. Obviously, all the members wanted to be here. So with that, do we have is there any other discussion? With that, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.